Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 11th of September 2013. My name is TotalBiscuit with today's gaming news and comment. Coming up in the show, Australia cracking down on deceptive free-to-play titles for kids. The G4 TV channel is set to continue, and we'll be having a roundup of the indie bundles that are currently available for you to purchase. All this in the OC Remix track of the day is coming your way right about now. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission has spoken on the subject of free-to-play apps on Android and iOS devices. They are currently in the process of examining the 300 most popular free apps among Australian children, and they are attempting to determine whether or not these games are deliberately deceptive and misleading. If they determine that's the case, they will be applying pressure to the companies to attempt to increase transparency for Australian customers. Delia Rickard of the ACCC stated that staff are looking for apps that are free but in fact involve in-app purchases. Looking at the disclosure that exists in the App Store when you download it, does it tell you that there are in-app purchases? And even if it does tell you, does it give you any details? Many have purchases in apps that kids use that are over $100 with just the swipe of the finger. We are looking at the whole issue as to whether or not this is misleading. This follows up from a couple of high-profile cases, including the case of a woman whose son racked up a $3,000 credit card bill in purchases for Simpsons Tapped Out. She was able to get the charges reversed. However, Apple said that they would not be able to help her again at that point. This is, of course, mostly due to the fact that in order to actually purchase this stuff, the son would have had to enter a password. And that password would have had to be given to him, of course, by the parent in question. Google also has a similar system on the Google Play Store, where a password must be entered prior to any kind of purchase with a linked account. It is also entirely possible to turn off in-app purchases using the iOS device. Now, I want to stress that in general, I don't think this is a bad thing whatsoever. I feel that there are plenty of predatory and ridiculous business models on iOS. Huge amounts of them. And the fact that most of these games even have the option to buy $100 worth of currency at once is kind of outlandish. We're also talking about games that are built around that very idea. An awful lot of free-to-play games that are coming out which are designed specifically to survive on the basis of so-called whales, people that are willing to spend hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars on that one game, and everybody else plays for free, which doesn't sound like a particularly healthy combination to me, especially when a lot of these games are built with the idea that you have to pay in order to speed up your progress, and the game deliberately pads out each progressive part of the title in order to make you do that. When you start off, building things take 30 seconds, and then further down the road, they take hours and hours, and you progressively have to pay more and more in order to speed things up, and all that kind of thing. And hey, once you're invested, what's a little bit more on the top, right? Yeah, that's really not a healthy model for any game to be. Not only that, but the fact that this model exists has spawned a series of titles which aren't even games in the form of cow clickers, which simply is paying for the privilege of having your device flash up a little thing that said you did well, you know? It's like being given a merit badge for absolutely nothing. Hey, you are fantastic at spending money on things that don't exist. Here is a badge that does not exist. Anything that cracks down on that is good, not only because it is a fairly exploitative business model, but because those games are rubbish. Hey, that's probably the biggest reason beyond any of it. You don't see reasonable titles use that kind of business model. Even you compare PC free-to-play to stuff on iOS, not even close to being the same. Not even close. We're talking about games on iOS that are solely designed to be the bare minimum of what a game actually is. A bare minimum of gameplay, and give these nice little dopamine-fueled responses every time you click something or collect something. They are designed from the ground up to try and get as much money out of people as possible for bare minimum effort. They are terrible video games. Absolutely awful. And those games would not exist in that form were it not for the business model that actually keeps them propped up and profitable. So anything that undermines that is good in my opinion. However, we should really bear in mind that there's a lot of hysteria surrounding this, and I hate it whenever hysteria surrounds any kind of video game topic, no matter how ridiculous it happens to be, because again, we are talking about the idea of something that was the fault of the parent. It is impossible to buy stuff in these games without the authorization of the parent. You cannot do that. You need to have given out your password to your kid. And if you give your kid an iPad or an Android device and then give them the password to an account that is linked to your credit card, what the hell did you expect to happen? This is not a new thing. It is hardly the first time that kids have used credit cards without their parents' permission. This has been going on since the days of mail order. Honestly, this is not a change. This is just a quicker way of doing it, and more to the point, they're not getting anything for it. That's kind of the worst thing. Whatever the case, if you give your password out, that is kind of your own fault. The whole awareness idea, what they're talking about here is, does it tell you? Does it give you any details? It does. Every iOS title that has in-app purchases is clearly labeled on the store. Clearly. You cannot download that app without reading it unless you deliberately skipped the description page, which is right there. You've got to read that and then click the download button. You've even got to put in your password to download a free title, which I might add is super annoying, but there you go. I don't think there's necessarily a question that in the back of the minds of some of the people that design these business models, there is this idea of, oh, we can get a few kids this way. Admittedly, they get themselves in more trouble than it's worth, maybe. The amount of money that's coming in is not coming from kids. You might think that kids are being the guys exploited. That's an easy sensationalist way to look at it. In reality, you're actually seeing these games, which appear to be for kids, being fueled by adults. Lots and lots of adults. Why does this surprise you? Who exactly plays the majority of Facebook games? It's not kids. They got plenty of other options. It's adults. And often older ones as well, even middle-aged people. They're playing Facebook games. They're very, very simplistic. They give that little basic dopamine response of getting rewards and things like that. And they're also the people that are pumping hundreds of dollars into these games to actually keep them afloat in the first place. And at that point, you have to say, look, this is your responsibility. If you choose to sink hundreds or thousands of dollars into a free-to-play game as a grown adult, that is your call. And if you get yourself into trouble that way, you don't turn around and say, oh, how evil the game was. These game developers sure did exploit me. No, you're an adult. You can make your own decisions, and of course, you can make your own mistakes. I am fine with more obvious warnings being put on things. I am also fine with these companies being held to account and awareness being raised. I'm just not fine with all of the blame being shifted onto a market that is obviously making a lot of money. Someone's got to be giving them the cash. Someone's got to be willing to actually make these purchases. Someone is feeding these terrible video games. And that is not the fault of the people that made them. In February of this year, it was announced that G4 would be converted into the so-called Esquire network, effectively ending the run of Tech TV and G4, the cable gaming channel. However, it would appear that this is no longer the case, and indeed, the Universal Style channel on NBC will be turned into the Esquire channel, with G4 remaining in its current operational state. This is a rather curious announcement, of course, since for the last few months we've been thinking, yep, G4 is pretty much dead. And I don't think a lot of us were really all that sad about that, especially considering that the biggest asset of G4 moved over to Revision 3 in the form of the one and only Adam Sessler. Whatever the case, that means that G4 will continue its weird existence in a market that really doesn't make an awful lot of sense. It sounded like a good idea a long time ago to have a gaming-related channel, but since video has moved pretty much entirely over to the internet when it comes to gaming-related content, and on-demand is the thing, I really don't see a place for G4 right now. I really don't. I mean, what is the point? What is the purpose? The weird thing about G4, of course, is that there wasn't that much gaming-related content actually left on it. If I look at the schedule right now, I see the schedule for Monday containing no gaming-related content of any description. In fact, it seems to be reruns of Cops Heroes, about 6 hours of Ninja Warrior, Campus PD, and tomorrow at 9 AM, there's X-Play for a couple of hours. And that really is about it. Of course, Attack of the Show had its final episode and no longer exists. It's just a weird network that doesn't really seem to serve any practical purpose right now, and I wonder whether or not, since they've decided to renew it, as it were, that there will be more gaming-related content on it. I don't see how that could possibly happen. Any gaming audience that was there, I think, has long since disappeared, and that makes me think Well, they're probably going to use the network for a different purpose. They're not going to turn it into Esquire, but it's probably not going to turn right back into Tech TV. X-Play still, of course, has Morgan Webb and Blair Herter, which is cool, don't get me wrong. They've lost Cess, which is kind of a big deal. And I have to wonder what their relevance is anymore. And to be honest, what was their relevance in the first place? A long time ago, having something like G4 and Tech TV was kind of cool, because it was really the only presence that games actually had actively and regularly on television in the United States. And that seemed like a good thing. But honestly, every single attempt to get games onto TV has not really worked all that well. There's a couple of these rare small exceptions, of course, that nobody watched, like Video Gaiden, like some of the good game stuff over in Australia on ABC. Those are decent, but we're not talking about major success there, and it's weird, really, because there are so many gamers you'd think that content would actually have an audience. It does, and that audience exists online and clearly didn't buy what G4 was selling, I'm sorry. The television style of presentation doesn't make a lot of sense for gaming-related content, considering how niche that gaming-related content is, and also how long-form some of this stuff actually is. We're talking about people that are willing to watch an entire Let's Play of a 20, maybe even 40-hour game. We're talking about people that are willing to spend hours looking at footage of a game they're considering buying, which is not going to work on television. Great, you know, you got 3 hours of the same game on G4 or something along those lines. That would never work. That's an absurd way of doing things. You've got to be general appeal on a cable channel, because honestly, you need to bring in that larger demographic so that the ad revenue can flow. Otherwise, you simply cannot exist. So, as far as I'm concerned, the G4 concept just flat out does not work anymore. And I don't expect it to ever work. So I'm intrigued to see what they decide to do with it after this. I don't expect a resurgence of gaming out of it, but they can't be making that much money doing reruns of American Super Ninja or whatever the balls it's called. So we'll see. I am not confident, though. I'm certainly not holding out any hope for it. And finally, let's have a look at some of the bundles that you'll be able to buy. There's actually quite a few nice indie bundles, so let's start running through them, shall we? We're going to kick off with the Bundle Stars bundle for Men of War. This is currently $3.01 and consists of all of the current Men of War titles. That's Assault Squad, Men of War, Red Tide, Condemned Heroes, and Vietnam. I will repeatedly tout these games because they are awesome. They are not Company of Heroes, right? You need to get this out of your head right now. If you thought that this was a knockoff of Company of Heroes, you're completely mistaken. The way that Men of War actually works is that it's more of a squad control-based strategy game, right? And it's pretty fun as a direct result of that. It allows you to control small squads down to inventory management as well as individual control. You can actually directly take control of one of your soldiers and aim with them, which is pretty cool. You can hijack vehicles, which is also nice. It's got a nice vehicle damage modeling system as well. We're talking about the idea of optics being destroyed, your tracks coming off, and all sorts of different things like that. There's a lot of detail in it. It's a very challenging game, but it's not a difficult game to grasp and get into, because really you're microing around small units of troops. You've just got to figure out how best to do it. The way that I would describe it is it's a modern version of Commandos, which was an old school strategy game where you had to control 4 or 5 different commandos to get them through these really hard missions by using their various different abilities. Men of War's kind of like that. Assault Squad, in my opinion, is probably the best of the series. Vietnam's pretty good as well. Then, of course, you've got the original, which is solid, admittedly has some dodgy voice acting. Condemned Heroes is definitely the weakest part of that particular pack, but for $3, there's no way this isn't worth it. It's actually a freaking bargain, so by all means give this a try. I think you'll enjoy it very much. These are all Steam keys, by the way, so those weird people that don't buy anything that isn't the Steam key, well, you don't have an excuse. We'll move on to the Back to School 2 bundle. This is from Indie Royale. Not an amazing bundle, honestly. It does have a couple of decent titles in it, but currently, until they unveil some more stuff, it's hard to recommend it. We've got Thunderwolves Stellar Impact Devo 100% Orange Juice. No, I'm deadly serious. And Applejack 1 and 2. Which is odd to say the least. 100% Orange Juice, by the way, is a board game for those asking. It's a little strange. So the best game in that bundle is probably Thunderwolves. Relatively entertaining for the most part. Not great. I mean, if it was a modern reincarnation of Desert Strike, then it wasn't a particularly good one. It has too many sections which are just not as fun as the main helicopter flying. I don't know why they'd want you to take away from that, but they do. They also have Stellar Impact, which is kind of weird because Stellar Impact is, of course, a free-to-play game. One assumes that this particular version does include the other ships, however. It's not a game that has a big population, but it's still actively played to some degree, and it is quite a lot of fun. It is a Dota-style game in space, which involves an awful lot of broadside aiming and interesting ship-turning mechanics, which I like. Devo is a platformer involving a hamster. That's probably all you need to know. Applejack 1 and 2 were originally Xbox indie games. It is, once again, I wouldn't call it a puzzle platformer. It's very much one of those torture platformers to some degree. And then we don't know what the rest of them are. So it's definitely not the worst bundle ever. It's probably worth it for Thunderwolves and Stellar Impact to some degree, but I certainly don't think it's as strong as the Bundle Stars one. So if you're picking up only one this week, you might want to look at that one. Alternatively, there is the Indie Gala Flashpoint bundle, which is currently available for the next week or so. This has got some pretty strong titles in it. The standouts in this one have got to be Killing Floor, the complete pack, which includes all of the DLC and expansions, which is awesome. Knit Underground, which is a really good puzzle platformer, and Hammer Fight, which is hilarious and great in every possible way. It's a game about two-dimensional flying machines with very large weapons attached to them, and it's kind of physics-based in the way that you swing your weapons. It's really kind of cool. The other stuff in there, obviously you got Red Orchestra Ostfront. There are still people playing that, but of course Red Orchestra 2 is out. After Fall Insanity, which is just dreadful, and then a bunch of games that I'm actually not familiar with. Actually, I am familiar with Ignite. I did a video on that a long time ago. It's a fairly average racing game. There's nothing really too special about it. The other games in the pack are Sarah, Mosaic Box, and Yumsters 2 Around the World, as well as 3 albums worth of MP3s available there. And this bundle is in support of Able Gamers and the Gaia Project X, so you can go and check that out. And finally, of course, the Humble Weekly Sale is just going on for the next 2 days, so you're going to have to be a bit quick on this one. This is Arkham Games, and as a result, it's got all of their stuff, including all 5 DLC packs for AI War, which is the standout game in this particular bundle, I've got to say. Also includes Valley Without Wind, Valley Without Wind 2, which was meant as kind of an apology for Valley Without Wind, which was not all that great. And Valley Without Wind 2 is a bit of an improvement on that. Tidaless is in there as well, which is a really nice puzzle game. Shattered Haven, which is a cool little 2D survival game. And Skyward Collapse, which is a strange game. It's basically a board game where you play against yourself, which is rather odd to say the least. Arkham Games, as always, has a bunch of really interesting ideas. Their forthcoming game, Bionic Dews, I actually have footage of from PAX, and I'll be showing you that in the next couple of weeks. But this bundle is worth it solely for AI War. I will say it time and time again, AI War Fleet Command is incredible. Get it with a few friends, play it, it's a unique experience. It's a co-op space strategy where you play against a rogue AI that basically has a completely ridiculous set of routines, yeah? So the way that the AI reacts, they try to design an AI that reacts in the way that a rogue computer would. And you've got to be very careful with how you actually approach the way AI War functions. It is completely and totally unique. It's got a bit of a learning curve to it, but I would strongly recommend it without question when it comes down to this. Oh, please, please, please do try it. It is very cool indeed. And of course, that's pay what you want. So head on over to humblebundle.com/weekly to access that one. That is me done for the day, folks. Thank you very much for watching the content patch. Before I go, I'd like to give you the OC Remix track of the day. Of course, of course. Would you like some sexy Castlevania? Yes, yes, you would. Remixer ktriton brings you just that. It is a remix from Castlevania Symphony of the Night of 2 tracks, Dance of Pails and Wandering Ghosts. And it's a little bit sexy, a little bit jazzy, a little bit rhythm and blues in there, with just a nice bit of swing for good measure. It is really odd, but surprisingly effective, so do check it out. Downloads in the description below this video, and I'll see you next time.
you.